Today, in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, Organ Donation India Foundation, and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. And today's topic is COVID returns, impact on startups. A startup is a company or project undertaken by an entrepreneur to seek, develop, and validate its scalable economic model. While entrepreneurship refers to all new businesses, including self-employment and businesses that never intend to become registered, startups refers to new businesses that intend to grow large beyond the solo founder. At the beginning, startups face high uncertainty and have high rates of failure, but a minority of them do go on to be successful and influential. Some startups become unicorns, that is, privately held startup companies valued at over 1 billion US dollar. Startups typically begin by a founder or co-founders who have a way to solve a problem. The founder of a startup will begin market validation by problem interview, solution interview, and building a minimum value product MVP, that is a prototype to develop and validate their business models. The startup process can take a long period of time, by some estimates 3 years or longer, and hence sustaining effort is required. Over the long term, sustaining effort is especially challenging because of the high failure rates and uncertain outcomes. Models behind startups presenting as ventures are usually associated with design science. Design science uses design principles considered to be a coherent set of normative ideas and propositions to design and construct the company's backbone. For example, one of the initial design principles is affordable loss. Because of the lack of information, high uncertainty, the need to make decisions quickly, founders of startups use many heuristics and exhibit biases in their startup actions. Biases and heuristics are parts of our cognitive toolboxes in the decision-making process. They help us decide quickly as possible under uncertainty, but sometimes become erroneous and fallacious. Entrepreneurs often become overconfident about their startups and their influence on an outcome. Entrepreneurs tend to believe that they have more degree of control over events, discounting the role of luck. Some of the most critical decision biases of entrepreneurs to start up a new business are overconfidence, illusion of control, the law of small numbers, availability bias, escalation of commitments. Startups use several actions principles to generate evidence as quickly as possible to reduce the downside effect of decision biases such as an escalation of commitment, overconfidence, and the illusion of control. Many entrepreneurs seek feedback from the mentors in creating their startups. Mentors guide founders and impart in entrepreneurial skills and may increase the self-efficacy of nascent entrepreneurs. Mentoring offers directions for entrepreneurs to enhance their knowledge of how to sustain their assets relating to their status and identity and strengthening their real-time skills. Startup investing is the action of making an investment in an early stage company. Beyond founders' own contributions, some startups raise additional investment at some or several stages of their growth. Not all startups trying to raise investments are successful in their fundraising. In the United States, the solicitation of funds became easier for startups as the result of the Jobs Act. Prior to the advent of equity crowdfunding, a form of online investing that has been legalized in several nations, startups did not advertise themselves to the general public as investment opportunities until and unless they first obtain approval from the regulators for an initial public offering IPO that typically involved a listing of the startup's securities on a stock exchange. Today, there are many alternative forms of IPO commonly employed by startups and startup promoters that do not include an exchange listing, so they may avoid certain regulatory compliance obligations, including mandatory periodic disclosures of financial information and factual discussions of business conditions by management that investors and potential investors routinely receive from registered public companies. Investors are generally most attracted to those new companies distinguished by their strong co-founding team, a balanced risk-reward profile, and scalability. Attractive startups generally have lower bootstrapping, self-funding of startups by the founders, costs, high risk, and higher potential return on investment. Successful startups are typically more scalable than an established business in the sense that the startup has the potential to grow rapidly with a limited investment of capital, labor, or land. Timing has been the single most important factor for biggest startup successes, while at the same time it is identified to be one of the hardest things to master by many serial entrepreneurs and investors. Startups have several options for funding. Revenue-based financing lenders can help startup companies by providing non-dilutive growth capital in exchange for a percentage of monthly revenue. Venture capital firms and angel investors may help startup companies begin operations, exchanging seed money for an equity stake in the firm. Venture capitalists and angel investors provide financing to a range of startups with the expectation that a very small number of the startups will become viable and make money. In practice, though, many startups are initially funded by the founders themselves using bootstrapping, in which loans or monetary gifts from friends and families are combined with savings and credit card debt to finance the venture. Factoring is another option, though it is not unique to startups. Other funding opportunities include various forms of crowdfunding, for example, equity crowdfunding, in which the startup seeks funding from a large number of individuals, typically by pitching their idea on the internet. Startups can receive funding via more involved stakeholders, such as startup studios. Startup studios provide funding to support the business through a successful launch, but they also provide extensive operational support, such as HR, finance and accounting, marketing, and product development to increase the probability of success and propel growth. A company's value is based on its technology. It is often equally important for the business owners to obtain intellectual property protection for their idea. The Economist estimated that up to 75% of the value of US public companies is now based on their intellectual property, up from 40% in 1980. Often, 100% of a small startup company's value is based on its intellectual property. As such, it is important for technology-oriented startup companies to develop a sound strategy for protecting their intellectual capital as early as possible. Startup companies, particularly those associated with new technology, sometimes produce huge returns to their creators and investors. A recent example of such is Google, whose creators became billionaires through their stock ownerships and options. When investing in a startup, there are different types of stages in which the investor can participate. The first round is called seed round. The seed round generally is when the startup is still in the very early phase of execution, when their product is still in the prototype phase. At this level, angel investors will be the ones participating. The next round is called Series A. At this point, the company already has traction and may be making revenue. In Series A rounds, venture capital firms will be participating alongside angels or super angel investor. The next rounds are Series B, C, and D. These three rounds are the ones leading towards the IPO. Venture capital firms and private equity firms will be participating. Startup India is an initiative of the Government of India. The campaign was first announced by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, during his speech on 15th August 2015. Indian startups are now spread across the length and breadth of the entire country. The shift in global focus is on promoting women entrepreneurs and fostering an inclusive and innovative environment. Efforts are also being made by diverse stakeholders in the Indian startup ecosystem to elevate domestic policies in concurrence with global trends. The role of the state government becomes very important in developing the necessary infrastructure and support to foster the startup ecosystem. Due to the given constraints of infrastructure and supporting services, India needs to build upon low cost and high impact solutions. Although there has been an increase in angel and venture capital funding, the amount invested must be augmented. It is crucial that the ecosystem is well integrated to connect startups to fund houses and other stakeholders. While it is important to elucidate overreaching features of the ecosystem, the role of states and India's federal structure in both building the ecosystem as well as closely monitoring futuristic measures that can aid India's growth story. Now, what is the COVID-19's impact on startups? The value of investments in India have fallen to $0.33 billion in March 2020 from $1.73 billion in March 2019, which indicates a fall of nearly 81.1%. There has been a total fall of 50% in the number of companies funded presently, 69 firms in March 2020 in contrast to 136 firms in March 2019. Sometime between mid-February 2020 and end of March 2020, a number of investors have also pulled back their closing current funding rounds. Thus, one of the major challenges faced by the startups has now become sourcing funds, which has resulted in cash flow issues for many. The lockdown has not only impacted the daily business operations, but it has also forced a good many startups into preparing for contingency plans to limit workforce and to cut down employee salaries. Various startup founders have also taken pay cuts to limit the losses faced. COVID returns. The per-day cases peaked on 16 September 2020 in India with 97,894 cases and have since come down to 9,309 on 11th February 2021. On 30th March 2021, that is yesterday, after 2 holidays, India registered 53,076 new cases of coronavirus and 355 deaths, which has taken the country's cumulative tally past 12.15 million and the death toll to 1,62,502. And to discuss this very, very important topic and relevant topic, COVID returns impact on startups, we have a very elite, well-informed, experienced leaders in their field panelists with us. I would like to invite my first guest, and he is Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal. Just a minute, I will just see some. Yeah. Welcome, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal is the former Professor of Marketing Innovation and Management, IIM Lucknow, XLRI Jamshedpur, and California State University, USA. He is president of Indo-Gulf Marketing Association. He is US Fulbright Fellow Boston, EFMD Fellow Paris, and British Council Fellow London. In 2019, he was ranked among the 251 most fabulous global education leaders. Welcome, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal on our show. And I would like to inform to all our viewers that the commitment of Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal is very high. He committed for this program, and today, although he has taken 2 vaccines, although it was not in India, in Dubai, and the vaccines of Chinese made in Dubai he has took. But after that, again, he got the COVID, and now he's talking and he's joining us from the hospital room only. I must salute Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal for his commitment for the benefit of the viewers. Welcome, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Now, COVID returns, and you are the sufferer, and you are a first hand right now. You are in the hospital with the corona, down in the corona in Dubai. Now, we would like to know from you, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, COVID returns impact on startups. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, please. Please unmute.
Thank you. As I would like to say, Professor Goel, although he denies that, but to me, he is a more than a professor, a colleague, and very, very esteemed, knowledgeable person. I'm particularly delighted for talking two important things in this country, which are fueling as well as perhaps pulling back the economy of India. The first is the factor which is pulling back is COVID returns, and the fact that is going up and making India up into that 5 trillion economy or more than that is the startups. I am glad that you have given such a fantastic life cycle, conceptual, as well as contemporary description of the importance of startups. Maybe many people know this, maybe people may not this, but still it bears repetition that India is a home of startups next to USA, number two country in the world after US. Number two is that in India, every day, 4 to 5 startups get registered. In other words, we are talking about almost 1400, 1500 startups of the kind that we can talk about and which is happening in this country. The third point is that the biggest supporter of startups in the world, the SoftBank, is headed by an Indian, a person who was very, very big time involved as well as responsible for the growth of Bharti Telecom or Airtel. I know him personally because he was the person who had funded the first chair which I had held at IIM Lucknow on customer relationship management 20 years ago. The fourth point I would like to make here is that in spite of everything that we have, 90% of the startups fail within the first 5 years of their formation. Now, if it is showing a kind of a mixed picture, then let me also tell you that in 2020, in the COVID infested year of 2020, 11 startups became unicorn. Unicorn by definition is a business where 1 billion or more is held under private, closely held setup of that university, of that particular entity. 11, unicorns. In other words, $1 billion startups we are talking about. The latest was Pine Lab from very, very close to my house in Noida. In Noida, 20 it became. If we look into the second part of your thesis, which is COVID returns, the picture is extremely dangerous, scary, and gloomy. Unfortunately, in India, we have seen so much gloom, so much, problems everywhere that we have become by nature immune to the intensity of the scare and all, which others, they may be worried. We just take it as a part of our daily life. But fact of the matter here is it's a very, very dangerous phase. Number one, death toll will be higher. Number two, number of days to double the things will be shorter, which means we are talking of spread very, very big time. And third, worst part is that we have become now weary, COVID weary. We don't even talk about it. Or if anybody talks, we just switch off, tune out, because we have heard so much. We have gone through that. The moment we don't talk about it, the corona will become worse because of these conditions that we have. So let's talk about the effect of corona on the startups. Fortunately, recently there was a survey which was done, and in that survey they found, although it was just a sample survey, it was not a population survey but sample survey, so therefore generalizations will be subject to those kind of limitations of any sample based study, that 70% of the business in startups mentioned that they are adversely affected by COVID-19 or the COVID situation. 70%. And they said that almost only 22% companies have enough cash to go for the next 3 to 6 months, which means the number will go up. Now remember, I said in ideal situations, 90% anyway die within first year. Now this death rate will be accelerated because of what we are seeing in the COVID. And as a result, demand is dying in many cases. When demand is dying, revenue is slowing down, then three things happen. Companies cut back. They cut back on their operations. They start cutting the salaries of the employees. They start firing the employees. They start consolidating, and I use the word consolidate within words because what they are saying actually is closing down some of the businesses and bringing some of the business under that. And then the gap between the revenue and the expenditure still continues to escalate. So they become more vulnerable to that. All these things are happening to the startups. So what is the startup? Actually, startup is nothing but a variant of entrepreneurship. That entrepreneurship has been done with a very, very clear message of taking risk on something which they believe is disruptive, on something which is disruptive but useful to the society, something which is disruptive and useful, but also a business model can be built around it. In other words, they are not dreamers, they are visionaries. That's the difference between dreamer and visionary. The dreamer doesn't have a plan, visionary has a plan. But that plan was built on certain assumptions, and all those assumptions are going to be absolutely tested, or perhaps tested very early, and as a result death of the startups will start happening quicker. Then you have very beautifully mentioned about the funding cycles and funding stages. Only 22% people received the pre-COVID commitments from these companies in order to have the funding. In other words, all other companies either cut back or rescheduled, or they are starting to look at the business model as well as the survivability of these startups afresh. The moment you start doing things afresh, then the gains which you have had previously will also start getting eroded, because then in that case you are starting your inning one more time, almost separately, like in the case of the cricket match, that when there is a very set pair and one person gets out, and when next person comes in, then there is a lot of uncertainty because they both have to settle down together. So given all these particular situations, how come that these companies became unicorn? 11 companies became unicorn, $1 billion company. There is a very, very good explanation for it. And that explanation is that all these companies, except one company, had a common thread of technology. All of them were tech companies. And tech is the magic word today in order to deal with the COVID. Remote, door to door, to contactless. You can give words after words after words where there is no personal interface. There is an interface, but digital interface. So if these particular things are there, obviously the startups have much, much more chance. Unfortunately, there are more number of startups which are asset based. And asset based means that physical assets are there, and physical assets cannot sit idle until you do not make money by keeping the planes on the ground. You make money when planes are up in the air, which is called up, the kind of asset based companies. So as a result, I believe that with, and I'll come back to it later, again, sir, with your permission, that how these startups are coping, number one, and number two, how they are contributing also to maintain, to manage, to enhance the effectiveness of the efforts by all of us to manage this kind of corona or COVID situation. In other words, they are not only there, but they are also giving. So, but they are there in a different way. And what are the strategies that they have opened? So, to sum up my point, and this is where I would, give it to my esteemed panel, which I am really, really very happy that you have brought assembled such esteemed speakers around me. That number one, startups by nature are a risk-bearing venture. Number two, this risk has become greater suddenly because of this COVID. And number three, government has no ecosystem to support the private startups. And as a result, they have to go to these funding agencies, and funding agencies have their own limitations because they also have to, explain to their own shareholders. So as a result, you will see that startups are in difficult time. But whether this difficult time will become worse in COVID returns, I'm afraid I will have to say at this moment, yes. They will be having very difficult time, more difficult time. How and what to manage, that probably if you give me time, sir, I will come back. At this particular moment, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, for giving that uh, factual picture of the startups facing the conditions during the COVID time and now going to face in the COVID returns. And he has given the complete details how the startups were doing. Although he has made a very important point that in spite of COVID time, 11 startups become unicorn, which means that they have their valuation is more than $1 billion each. So this shows that the companies were tech companies which were getting good response during the COVID time. But what he says is also very important that the COVID return, if the COVID will be there, these companies, because of the no ecosystem, no support from the government, and even the no support from the financial companies from their own limitation, it's not possible to carry on the startup business the way it was pre-COVID time. So for him, according to Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, it's a very, very difficult time for the startups if the COVID, which is obvious now, is returning back. Then this year again, the startups will face lots of difficulties. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, for giving your views. And I'm really thankful that in spite that you are in a hostel room in Dubai, suffering from corona, you are so much dedicated to your academics, I must say, and your work that you have agreed to come on our show. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Professor Dr. R. Gopal. Professor Dr. R. Gopal is the director and head of the Department of D.Y. Patil University. He is the former dean, D.Y. Patil University School of Management. He is basically an engineer from IIT Kharagpur in mechanical engineering. He is also MBA, ICWA, PhD, and postdoctoral research degree DLIT. He is also the member board of management of the Ajankya D.Y. Patil University. He has more than 27 years of corporate experience with Bush India Limited, L&T, Tata Economic Consultancy Services, and Siemens. Additionally, he has more than 30 years of teaching experience in various B schools in and around Mumbai in the areas of marketing, finance, and general management, etc. He was the visiting faculty in several B schools in USA. In the USA, he has conducted several programs on topics like how to do business in India. He has also published more than 200 research papers, both in India, in Indian and foreign journals. He has been awarded the best outstanding research paper at the Asia Pacific Marketing Conference held in Malaysia. He is also a reviewer to several international journals having a high impact factor. He is the guide for MPhil and PhD students of several universities in India. More than 100 research scholars have received their PhD and MPhil degree under his guidance. He is also the author of several books and is the chief editor to several national and international journals of repute. Dr. R. Gopal is the recipient of several national and international awards. If I will read the entire list, it will take my full program, but yes, few of them I would like to highlight, such as Rashtriya Vidya Saraswati Puruskar, Rashtriya Vikas Ratan Award, Glory of India Award, Rajiv Gandhi Educational Excellence Award, Best Teachers Award, Best Management Teachers Award, Educationist Award, Star of Asia Award, and many, many more. Welcome, Dr. R. Gopal, on our show. Professor Dr. R. Gopal, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal has mentioned in his opening remarks. And Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal is very clear that and he also agrees that the corona is coming back. In this condition, the condition of the startups will face again this year the problems far more what they have faced even in 2020. Now, we would like to know from you, COVID returns impact on startups. Professor Dr. R. Gopal, please.
Thank you very much, Lal Saab. Good morning to you. Good morning, Professor Dr. Agarwal. Good morning, Harsh Juneja and Mrs. Divya. Thanks once again for giving me an opportunity to present my thoughts. I would like to phase my talk into three parts. One, pre-COVID returns. Second, challenges faced by the startups in this phase. And third, strategies that startups must adopt in this difficult phase. So let's begin. The year 2020 has been an amazing year. A year of anguish, a year of trepidation, a year of fear, etc. It was also a year when individuals realized on the personal front that the value of life, the value of friendship, the value of relatives, and more important, the value of the importance of a family. On the macroeconomic front, it was not so good. A year of recession, a year where personal incomes fell, unemployment increased, and in many cases, many of us lost jobs. A study was conducted by me in April 2020 and published, wherein it showed that 9 sectors should show a promising growth. When I say promising, I mean 3 to 4% in the short run till the end of 2021. And they are food, beverages, pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, consumer goods, banking, insurance, supply chain, and the power sector. 9 sectors would show a moderate growth, meaning 0 to 2%, and they are consumer durables, gems, jewelry, retail trade, IT sector, telecom, agriculture, etc. And 5 sectors would show a negative growth, which is basically tourism, hospitality, automobiles, MSME sectors, etc. The study indicated that GDP would drop to a level of near zero by the end of the year 2020. I'm talking of the fiscal year 2020, and therefore could rise in 2021. The data released by the government indicated that the above is nearly 2. 2020, the government announced an Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan policy. 20 lakh crores was given for the revival of the Indian economy. And in addition, about 4.24 lakh crores was given by the RBI. And then in September 2020, the government announced a further support of nearly 1.5 trillion, taking the tally to almost 15%. And this was given mainly to startups, to MSMEs. Now you must remember there are about more than 6 lakh MSMEs in this country as per 2019. And they employ about 11 lakh employees, and they contribute to almost 20 to 25% of the GDP. Therefore, MSMEs and startups form a very big chunk of the Indian economy, and they are very important to the Indian economy. And for the first time, I must say, I'm repeating again, for the first time, the government has given a sum of rupees 10,000 to all roadside vendors as a loan so that they can become successful entrepreneurs. I have spoken to several bankers and they said that we've given to a large number of roadside vendors and they suspect this will become an NPA in the long run. For the first time, the MSMEs have also got several support from the government in terms of funding, GST, etc. Special charity startup fundings are given by banks like State Bank of India. Now turning ourselves a little bit to the startups, and I'm talking about startups, I'm referring to small entrepreneurs, small or micro level unicorns. And when I look at them, they comprise of the young India entrepreneurs who are and young India entrepreneurs can contribute in the areas of product, innovation, import substitution, process innovation, digital technology, and training programs. In the area of product innovation, the government has forced, I repeat the word, forced public sector units to publish a list of products which can be given to the Indian entrepreneurs as import substitution. The imports from China alone are to the extent of $70 billion. And they are in the area of nuclear, electricals, etc., which are, many of them are small items, which the entrepreneurs in India have got the capacity to manufacture. Additionally, we are known as the global pharmaceutical suppliers to the world, the global vaccine suppliers to the world, and we import almost $2.4 billion of API, that means associated products to the pharma sector from China, which the government of India has requested all MSMEs in this field to jump in and produce those APIs in this country. It will take at least about 1 year for the whole thing to set up. Many of the large organizations need processes because till yesterday, when the going was good, many large companies did not bother about the process. And now when the going is becoming tough, one of the chief areas where improvements are required is in the areas of process innovation, like processes in the areas of supply chain logistics, business re-engineering, strategy formulation, turnaround strategies, etc. Training is another big area, which is very big in demand. And in this area, there is a need for soft skills. The COVID has made all of us, let me use the word frustrated in open inverted, close inverted commas. And therefore you need programs like how to be happy, how to smile, stress busters, etc. Now, Ratan Tata himself has said, I think on technology side, there are many breakthroughs, and it is not confined to one or two sectors. On healthcare and medical treatment, there is a tremendous opportunities. In online areas, manufacturing fields everywhere, you look, there is a better way to do something. There is a big tendency which startups can help us. So you have to make newer, better ways of doing things at a low cost. Small entrepreneurs face a battalion of challenges. They are a one-man army who is involved in practically all aspects of the business. R&D, product innovations, product design, legal aspects, and more importantly, in the areas of finance. A study made by me in August 2020 indicated for the success of a startup, minimum 5 critical skills are required. What are they? Communication, time management, strategic and marketing goals, marketing thinking, resilience, that means handling rejections, stress burnouts, and the very most important, management of finance. And in my opinion, of all these 5, resilience and management of finance are very, very critical. And critical is only an understatement. Now, additionally, when you talk about digital space, it's all more problematic in getting finance. It's very easy to get finance. Why? Because what does a digital startup have? He has just a table and a chair. and a laptop or a desktop, and the banks are unwilling to give you loans based on this collaterals. The year 2021 has seen a resurgence of COVID pandemic. New cases have dramatically increased. Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat have become states where it has increased rapidly. New variants of COVID have come in. Social distancing and masking seems to be given a little lesser priority. Globally also the scenario is bad. Countries like France, Germany have now got into the third wave and have now got into the lockdown mood for another 1 year. Post this COVID resurgence, I did a district survey by contacting telephonically many various MSMEs and small entrepreneurs. And they have told me that funding is the biggest challenge, followed by uncertainties with respect to the growth, and followed by worries about survival. A small percentage also complained about bureaucratic interference. Given the above circumstances, what strategy should these young entrepreneurs and young startups do? A detailed discussions with them revealed: 1. Reduce cost to bare essentials. I'm repeating, bare essentials. 2nd, seek survival for the next 6 months, borrowing from perhaps parents, friends, relatives, because in my opinion, the pandemic is going to last for at least a minimum 1 year. Change our business strategy. Enter into areas like food aggregation. This is something which is growing very, very rapidly. EduTech, finance tech, e-commerce, gaming, digital platforms, and even e-grocery is something which is picking up. And I think startups need to change their business model in this direction. Some startups I know, especially in areas where I'm staying, have abandoned their businesses and started local roadside vending of clothes, apparels, food products. Some have even started delivering food to various office goers and families. Marketing in the new area needs to be strengthened and new pricing strategies. And I must tell you, communication is the key. Use of social media is the key. And there is a very, very strong need to get into reworking your entire business plan. Break it down to be a realistic business plan. And, we have to get into funding because many of them said funding is the most important area. I have been talking to many, many banks and many, many small entrepreneurs. MSME business loans, Mudra loans, credit guarantees, fundings, National Small Industries Corporation, credit-linked capital schemes for technology upgradation, Stand-up India funds, Coir Udyami Yogama, NABARD funds. These are some of the very, very helpful and easy to get funding strategies. Work from home is a new mantra. And I think we have to use a push strategy if you want to really grow. And last but not the least, I'm repeating last but not the least, in the worst scenario, is it possible to sell your business to a large organization because if it has been making money, and if it's a good business model that you have, you can sell it to business organizations like HUL or other organizations and get out of the current business, use that fund available to get into new business. And most importantly, resilience is the key. Experts point out that even if we can implement a few of these challenges, young startups might be able to mitigate some of their problems to a large extent. I think these 10 strategies are the key for success in this very difficult and very challenging period. With these few words, thank you very much, Lal Saab and everybody. Thanks for patient listening, and God bless all of you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. R. Gopal, for giving your very clear views about the startups. And Professor Dr. R. Gopal has given his views and said that he has conducted his own research and published his studies, and which his point is very clear. This time is very bad, and he says whatsoever good project thought by the promoters of the startups, but because of the COVID, everything has flattered. And he says that now the time has come that they have to change their strategies, they have to change their business module, as well as, in case if they could not, they try to dispose of their startup to a big corporations, so that at least they will have some funds either to sustain themselves or to start a new model of business. But he's also of that view, although he says the government is trying their best. They have given 10,000 rupees loan to the vendors on the roadside, and they have injected 20 lakhs crores rupees in the economy, that is about 10% of the GDP. But that is last year. And now, as Professor Dr. Gopal has discussed with the bankers and others, and even the entrepreneurs, and they says that the problem is lots of bureaucratic problems were there. And I would like to add here, Professor Dr. Gopal, and for the benefit of our viewers, that I have done on these topics earlier also, and the problem which the industrialists are facing are that the banks are not ready to give, as Professor Gopal has mentioned, that the bankers have told that this 10,000 rupees loan which has been given under this scheme is going to become NPA. Now, this was also about those MSME loan of 3 lakhs or 2 lakhs, whatsoever the government has discussed. There also the reservation of the banker is that today they will give the loan, but tomorrow they are sure that this money is not going to come back, because there is no road plan. They were knowing this. I'm talking somewhere of early June, July of 2020, because they were very clear that until unless there is a clear picture that COVID is going to end, it's not easy to recover the money from those MSMEs. And that's why there is a lots of reservation. Government wants that the money should go to the MSME, but the banker feels that if they will not be able to recover, again the question mark will come on their service book. So that's why they are reluctant. So there is a point which government and the bank or the Reserve Bank of India has to closely monitor and see how the benefit should go to the MSMEs or the startups. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. R. Gopal, for giving your views. Now, I would like to invite my next guest. He is Mr. Harsh Juneja. Mr. Harsh Juneja is the advisor of Project CACA, management consultant, musician, and president of CVA. A seasoned and self-made professional with over 35 years of total experience in various business environments. Major part of his career has been in planning and business operations of manufacturing, automobiles, office automation, and telecommunication industries. He worked with Escorts Limited for 10 plus years, in Modi Xerox Limited for 11 plus years, and for 13 plus years worked as Vice President and National Head, Strategic Alliances, Enterprise Business Services at Tata Teleservices Limited. He is PGDBA, PGDSM, Exports and Imports. He was graduated from Delhi University. He is the associate member of ASCI, Administrative Staff College of India, Hyderabad. He is visiting faculty, IIPM, NIS, IMI, LBSIM, Raval Institutions, GLA University, and Delhi School of Business. He is the Executive Secretary of Sangam Kala Group, national level social organizations devoted to the cause of music. He actively participates in the conferences organized by CII, NESCOM, Voice and Data, and SOCHM, etc. Welcome, Mr. Harsh Juneja, on our show. Mr. Harsh Juneja, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal as well as Professor Dr. R. Gopal has mentioned. And both are of the view that this time, the last year as well as this coming year, is very, very difficult time for the startups, because the COVID returns, when now COVID is coming back, is again a very much disaster. Professor Dr. Gopal has mentioned that the whole 1 more year, the business, especially the startups, have to suffer. Now, we would like to know from you, COVID returns, impact on startups. Mr. Harsh Juneja, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lal, for this elaborate introduction. A very good morning to you, Professor Dr. Amel Agarwal, Professor Dr. R. Gopal, Ms. Divya Mumaya, Global TV and other TV channels broadcasting this wonderful media conference. Millions of global viewers watching this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thankful and feel privileged to be a part of this distinguished forum, which is also celebrating its anniversary, and I came to know that recently. My heartiest congratulations to the team involved in the media conference, Mr. Lal. Well, I have got an opportunity to see some of the recent media conferences hosted by Mr. Lal on different subjects, and really admired, the detailing, the coverage on the subject, and to top it all, his energy level. And recently, last Monday, I was a part of the conference when the nation is celebrating, Holi. He was doing his media conference on a similar subject. Cheers and hats off to you, Mr. Lal. Now, for the past over 1 year now, we have been, every day hearing some news or the other regarding this COVID-19 pandemic. Good, bad, ugly. We have seen many challenges which everyone has gone through. Now, be it a businessman, a service class, a housewife, children, aging parents, and the worst affected daily wages. Our subject for today is restricted to the startups, right? Which means the business community, and I'll come a little more detailed into it. So let me divide my discussion into 4 quadrants, which is going to typically, help us cover the subject appropriately. And I would end with some suggestive points to ponder. The first is going to be what is typically a startup. The second is what challenges they normally face and generally face. And the third is going to be related to COVID again, which has impacted and will impact, their business. But the fourth one is going to be how do we overcome and find opportunities in this crisis and critical pandemic situation. And here I would little, be having a different, views on it, and kindly see that out. So what is the typical follow-up? I'm sure Lal Saab explained in detail in his initial, speech about what a startup is. But if I look at it in a simple language, it's a venture, right? And it's a venture which is initiated by founder or founders. It is around an idea or a problem or a gap in the market. So there's a gap in the market which has been established, and this idea is to have a solution to that. And last but not the least, this has got a potential for a significant business opportunity. Now, I am repeating this word, it has got a potential of significant business opportunity. Many years, and for many people, the startup was taken as small businesses, but no more. If I just quote the startup guru, Steve Blank, he has written, they are temporary organizations. I'll repeat, he is emphasized on temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. Now, if I give just one example, this would be more clearer. Uber was a startup a few years ago, right? And now it operates in 80 countries and about 10,000 cities. Do we call them a startup now? I'm sure absolutely no. So it's a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. I would like to give some example. that these startups, they're a very strong, cultured, tight-knit community. I call them, because I've been a part of that, being, heading in Tata Tele Services, I've been a part of the entrepreneurs and enterprise, and a lot of startups also came, in contact. I call them a light brigade, right? And when I call them the light brigade, it's because they are thin in nature and they are also needed to be charged. So the old, theory charge of the light brigade, we need to have that. I'll come a little more detail into, these. So let me pick up first the challenges. Now there are top 5 challenges that I picked up, which normally, they face. I'll come to COVID subsequently later on. The first and the foremost challenge which any startup would face is that they would have, a fierce competition. Competition poses one of the biggest, kind of a challenge. And if you are in a business, which is an online business, it is even tougher. There's no margin for error. Now, because you're working on a very thin margin and you can't afford to take, a wrong decision. Hiring is another challenge. You got limited budgets. The golden rule is the birds of a feather flock together. Team synergy wins. So if team synergy wins, you need to have right people at the right place. And since you have limited people, hiring is most critical, at this time. I think Professor R. Gopalan also touched this point. Financial management is again one of the most critical thing faced. Money begets money, and at times when there is a cash influx, the startup tends to find really hard to properly manage their finances and they bog down against the pressures. What is another critical thing is the cyber security. We have seen hackers are everywhere. It's a digital age. Even bigger companies like Facebook and Twitter, they are not, able to 100%, control. So it's an important thing to be a little cautious. And I'll give an example when I'm talking about the opportunities in this in a little more detail about it. Last but not the least, winning trust of the customer is one of the challenge which the startups face. And why? Because they don't have the large base like many companies. In my first company, Escorts, I joined them as a management trainee. I learned, and that was 1982, right? One sentence which haunted and it still comes to my mind. It's one satisfied customer gets you 100 customers over the next 10 years, but then you have to have one satisfied customer. And startups gradually build up. They don't have a ready-made base of the large customers. That's one of the challenge. Now, COVID-19 has impacted and is once again going to question this startup business. मेरे को इसमें एक शेर याद आ रहा है. वो मेरे पास आकर बोले कि बस एक मौका दे दो मुझे. वो मेरे पास आकर बोले कि बस एक मौका दे दो मुझे. अब आप ही बताओ कि शाखों से गिरे हुए पत्ते भी कभी दोबारा जुड़ते हैं. Anyway, so you won't get a second chance to form the first impression, or you have to do the first time right. So startups are very fragile, nazuk patte hote hain. And as I think Professor M. Agarwal quoted, that 90% of the startups fail in the first 5 years of the operations only. So they cannot afford, they have to do the first thing right. Now, while businesses across all the sectors can sense a replication of COVID-19, the startups have particularly been one of the most vulnerable. In fact, they are facing various formidable challenges. And I mentioned some of the normal ones, but I think specific to COVID, it's not only a challenge for existing startups, but also for the creation of the new ones. Now, it's very important. I think startup, as I think Professor Agarwal also said, it's a very important thing for any country for the growth, and they play a very important role. I think he quoted some figures about MSME and SMEs and startups, which contribute to about 21% of the GDP of the country. So creation of the new ones have stopped looking at this, challenging times in the past. If I quote an example from OECD, OECD is an organization for economic cooperation and development. It's an international body, and they've given some examples, that if you compare March, April 2020 with, that of 90, there's a 50% drop in the new add-up on the startups. Just giving you an example of Portugal, that drop is 70% in comparison to the same month of the previous year. Couple of more countries like Hungary, France, and Turkey, the drop had been 46, 54, and 58%. And OECD also forecasts that with COVID coming again, milder, but still very strong declines are evident in the creation of the startup in Australia, US, and Spain. Now, coming to India, I think Professor Lal has already quoted, what it was, 550 million in 2010. In 19, it's become 14.5 billion. And now there is an 81% drop, in the thing for the single month only, right? So lockdown has not only impacted the daily business operations, right? But it has also forced a good many startups into preparing a contingency plan, which is very important. That's normally also happen, but this contingency plan, because of the COVID-19, it has to be very, very strong. Limiting workforce, cut down on the employee salaries, various other things. In fact, founders have also taken a pay cuts, etc. So these are the measures, which are being taken. Most startups have witnessed a steep decline in their demand and supply with COVID recoming. This will ensure the question and the challenge once again on the very survival and limiting their growth. Now, most of the existing startups will face significant challenges due to these crises and the subsequent lockdown, which may happen in some of the cities and not all of them, except for some of those where COVID coming again will be benefited. Now here I'm giving you some sectors which are actually going to be benefited, and we have seen that. The delivery of essential services, if you are in that sector and a startup, it is going to do very well and you will be benefited. Educational technology, all the schools, all the education, all have gone online. We are having this conference also online, otherwise this would have been a physical this thing. Gaming and streaming services like Netflix, Prime Video, etc. These startups or these industries are going to really do well. The new startups are more vulnerable than the older incumbents because they got the base, right? They can bear the shock, again. I'm sure some preparation, and as I said, contingency plans must have been already in place by now. If not, I'm sure God saves them. In the era of COVID returns, startups are also witnessing heavy negotiations on the deal valuation. This point was, I think, touched by Dr. Professor R. Gopalan also. Heavy negotiations will go on. The new investors may now demand bargains and discounts in the value. This may delay the deal execution and the closing, the very closing of the startups or the cases. Investors may also adopt more cautious approach towards funding and would insist for more thorough due diligence, both in terms of commercial and legal aspects. The investors also will evaluate more strongly on the business prospects, right? Including any contingency plans kept or not kept. I'm sure this will be a certain how to startup will sustain in the longer run. They have to, before they give the money, they need to know how they have planned in the long term. Now I'm coming to the fourth and the last part of,
Please be brief, paucity of time.
Sure. Yeah. Now, the opportunities, this is very important because here I would differ from the previous two speakers because there are opportunities in crisis in the pandemic situation. Why I'm calling this as an opportunity is that because we have already experienced it once. We are not groping in the dark today. Startups have emerged as the key driver, as I said, for the national growth. So review. And I'm using 3 times, it should be rather more than that. What actions have you taken when you face the COVID crisis for the first time? which of those actions were fruitful and gave you the results? Did we do any benchmarking with others who did well and better than your own company? What did the competition do, right? That's another thing. What I think are you doing about problem solving, asking questions why 5 times? It looks after where you are having the root. So we got the learning in front of us. We got the clear results in front of us. Although COVID outbreak is and will continue to be a significant challenge, but the current recoming of the crisis may also create short-run and long-run opportunities, right? Opportunities because we got the learning not to repeat. Now, the simple example is, we've heard so many times, even on the phone, even by various people, wear the mask, washing of the hands at regular interval, 2 gaj ki duri, maintain social distance, etc., etc. Now the vaccine also. Have you not learned that? And if we have not got the vaccine, if we are not learning, then obviously the COVID is going to catch us. So talking about those learning which we have taken is most critical. During the crisis, startups have played a very critical role. They have been fast, they have been flexible, they have been very critical in helping many countries shifting towards fully digital work, education and health services. They are the ones who help. Take, for example, in India, like, I think when the COVID started, we didn't even have enough supplies of masks. We didn't even have enough supplies of PPE kits. And shortly we became the leading exporters. So I talked about 5 challenges, initially, those 5 challenges. The first one, I would like to touch as a solution and as an opportunity. And when you are having the cyber crime, which is only going to increase, heading, in a telecom industry, one thing which became very good was that we sold robust military-grade security system, which is VPN, Virtual Private Network, and this was on the wireless platform. Digital technology has been a clear winner in the crisis, right? So digital technology is one thing which one should follow. Encryption of the data security, which is cheaper. It's on the wireless platform also available. Play safe and cautious with the money. Don't be spendthrift. I think that's another one. Last but not the least, we'd have the high motivation of the Light Brigade, which is, I think, what is the critical. Let me give an example of certain countries, if I am allowed a couple of moments.
Mr. Juneja, can we take it in the next round, because the time is short and we have one panelist who has not yet spoken.
Okay,
next
so
round
let me conclude. Let me conclude by saying we got opportunity. The startups in India have been doing pretty well. They would continue to do well, right? Provided they take these learning, which I mentioned. These are like the small birds flying high. So I would only, end by saying, मंजिलें उन्हीं को मिलती हैं जिनके सपनों में जान होती है, पंखों से कुछ नहीं होता, हौसलों से उड़ान होती है. If you fail to prepare yourself, so prepare to fail. Thank you very much for listening and giving me the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Juneja. Due to the paucity of time, I have to cut short you, and I am not going to summarize what he has said. It is very, very clear. So now I am just directly inviting my next panelist, and she is CS Divya Momaya. CS Divya Momaya is the founder of Mentor My Brand, an initiative to train and groom promoter directors. She is the independent director of Motilal Oswal Financial Services Limited and Arihant Superstructures Limited, both listed on BSE and NSE companies. She is the fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. She is the founder mentor of DSMCO, possesses more than 16 years of experience, out of which 12 years as practicing company secretary. Her expertise include corporate and secretarial laws, corporate governance, business development, startups, mentoring and consulting businesses to scale up faster and better. She is founder of Mentor My Board. She is on a mission to help Indian corporate directors and build a community of 1 lakh directors. She is the author of a book, Relationships Coming Home to In-Laws, available on Kindle. Welcome, CA Divya Momaya on our show. CA Divya Momaya, you have already heard our earlier panelist, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, Professor Dr. R. Gopal, Mr. Harsh Juneja. Now, we would like to know from you the COVID returns, impact on startups. Please be brief, because otherwise there will be no time for the second round. Please.
Perfect. First of all, thank you, Mr. Lal, for the wonderful, initiative. Thank you, Mr. Gopal, Professor Gopal R. Gopal, for having me here, and wonderful panel. Really delighted to be here with you all. Now, I have been listening to all the stories, all the insights which you all have shared, and let me tell you, I have been myself running a startup in spite of having the experience of 16 years as the professional, and being in that ecosystem, I see lot of different changes, lot of drastic changes which have been happening in the entire startup ecosystem over the period of last 2 years with the impact of COVID. And we are living in a world which is a VUCA world. VUCA is, I mean, V stands for vulnerable, complex. C is for complex, U is for uncertain world, and most importantly, A is for ambiguous. And we are really living in today the ambiguous world wherein we don't know how the second wave of COVID is going to impact all of us, whether it is the existing business, SMEs, MSMEs, or startups. So here we are talking about the startups today. So let me tell you, when we talk of the startups, almost 46,000 200 plus startups are registered as of today with the DPIIT, that is the department of the, wherein, under the Startup India scheme. And as Professor Lal also mentioned, 90% of the startups fail in the initial 5 years. And we are really seeing so many startups coming up, trying to scale up. Some of them become unicorns, some of them are not able to sustain. So these all, when I see from the perspective or the lens of a person who itself running a startup, I see that it's the vision of the person, of the startup founder, how the person is looking at his or her own business in this VUCA world. And that's where it defines whether the business is going to survive, the business is not going to survive. And let me tell you, during this COVID, the first wave, which was there last year, almost 40% of the Indian startup had halted their operations. There were drop in the cash flows. There were drop in the overall operations. And most important impact which I saw was the restrictions on the funds which were coming from China and Mauritius routes. And almost when we talk of the unicorns, 18 out of 30 unicorns were funded heavily by Chinese investors. So that restriction, when it came, again, that was one of the major reason of dropping of the investments. FDI is coming, and India has been heavily dependent on FDI when it comes to especially the startups and the businesses. So government has been taking a lot of initiatives. So for example, on 16th of March, there was a notification which says that government has set up an expert advisory committee for funding, creating a seed fund of more than 500 CR for the startups. Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently had announced 1,000 crore of investment into the entire startup ecosystem. So these initiatives are being taken. Action COVID-19 team has been set up by a lot of venture capital companies who are ready to fund up to 500 crores in various startups. So I don't see there is any dearth of investments, but what I see from a perspective of, because I'm also a mentor of change with Niti Aayog, and I'm helping some of the incubation centers, helping some of the startups itself in in a mentoring and a hand-holding kind of an initiative. I see the vision which the startups have. When we talk of the startups, the change management, how you're going to deal with the change in the entire ecosystem in the outer world, you need to develop that agile management. And I strongly, because I have been guiding, handholding the directors, the promoters, founders, the startup founders from the very top perspective, I see that, and I strongly believe in one proverb, which is a Chinese proverb: the fish rots at its head. And that's where, the founders, the promoters have to be really, really agile when it comes to the management, it comes to the governance, and due weightage to be given to the compliance, the ethical aspects of the businesses. In this VUCA world, entire world is disrupted. So again, the startups which are, coming to disrupt the world, if they get disrupted, if they are not upskilled and as Mr. Gopal also mentioned, if the businesses are not skilling themselves, the businesses are not upskilling, upgrading their knowledge, it's not very difficult for them to wipe out. And that's where, I mean, I will, with a very, very short note, I will wind up here. And for the second round, surely there is a second wave coming up. With this second wave, I think the businesses, the already cash for the entire year, if the operations are down, the cash is drying out. If the second wave continues, there are going to be challenges. Government is coming out with a lot of initiatives. But at the same time, how the businesses take that wave and how fast they are able to adapt themselves into the new situation is going to determine whether they succeed or whether they fail. The unicorns are coming up, the businesses are wiping out, everything is happening. Again, it's the opportunities as well as challenges. How you take it up, it depends on the startup. So I would, with this one sentence, I would close my, introductory remarks as a startup, make sure that you are agile, you are adapting to the change, because we are living in a VUCA world. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Divya, for giving your very, very clear points about the startups. Now, my question goes to Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Are you there, Professor Agrawal?
Yes, I'm there.
This question has come from one of our viewers. Rather, she was a participant in one of the conference, Miss Manisha Singh. She is the Senior Manager, Contracts and Procurement at Goel India Limited, posted at Pata, UP. And she says that the government has declared in the budget of 2020 that the startups limits have increased from 25 to 100 crores. But because of the COVID, nobody is basically utilizing that. So what are your suggestions? Specifically, she has asked from your side, any suggestion? How could this situation improve for a startup? One, maximum 2 minutes. I will not be allowed, because I have to ask the questions to everyone. Please.
Thank you. No, I think please thank Manisha also for a very, very important question. You see, just because there is a fund limit or credit limit doesn't mean that you should utilize it. It simply means that you should utilize it only when you have viable, meaningful investment and ROI plan around it. So government has given this facility, and I think all startups need to do is what very clearly Divya, Harsh, both of them were very clear when they said that they have to start research among themselves, not research like professor research, but their own research in terms of their model, that whether they were right or not. And I think Harsh was beautifully expressing for us also when he said that this is a very good time to re-examine, reflect, and review the model that you begin with, because every model is not good for every situation. So resilience is number one, acceptance is number two, and recovery and correction is number three. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agrawal, Professor Dr. Agrawal. Professor Dr. R. Gopal, my question now to you is, you have mentioned about the loan and all those things government is doing. And you have also mentioned that the bankers have a reservation that this loan are going to become NPA. Then why you are terming it as loan? Why not pay directly? Take the situation of UK. UK is under lockdown from December. Still, it is under the lockdown. They are paying to those startups, to MSMEs, or to any private business entrepreneurs who cannot afford to, those who are not allowed to work during the lockdown, up to 80% of the salaries of the employees. So basically, the money is going to the citizens. Nobody is crying. 4 months, 3 months already passed there, or rather 4 months in the UK, completely locked down, and still they are surviving, and they have controlled the COVID third wave or second wave whatsoever drastically. Now, why not India? A rethinking should come instead of loan, because what 20 lakhs and 10% of GDP, the expert says it was only 1% of GDP, but we are not going in that discussion. My only point, limited point to you is, why loan when you know that the loan is going to be NPA, another lots of litigations, lots of problems for the bankers? Give direct money through the startups. So startups, like Ms. Divya has mentioned, are facing lots of financial crunch, and they have to cut, or they have to remove the staffs, etc. Instead of that, everyone will be there for the time being, and so their startups will not face the problems. What you say about this? 1 minute only, Professor Dr. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute. Please unmute. Please unmute, Professor.
Sir, I also want to say 1 minute, 1 second later, not now, but
Okay,
later.
okay. Yes, Professor.
And also, there are two sides of a coin.
Yeah.
One is from the demand side supply, and the other is from the supply side. What the government is emphasizing today is more on the supply side and not giving you cash in hand so that you can spend it. Why? Because the normal tendency of India is to save money, is to not spend. And when you start saving money, you do not help the Indian economy to grow. Please remember this. Today, the banks have got lots of money with them. They are flush with funds. And why are they flush with funds? Because there's so much of money in the banks that they don't know which avenues which will give them returns and which will not form an NPE. And that is one of the very simple reasons why the finance minister is always running after supply side policies and not demand side policies or consumption increasing policy, because we have a tendency to save. Our savings rate is almost as high as 22 to 23%.
Okay.
And that's the reason.
Okay, thank you very much. Now my question goes to Mr. Harsh Juneja. Mr. Harsh Juneja, don't you think the startups in India, the figure what Professor Dr. Agrawal has given is 90% fails. The reason is very clear that number one, corruption. Number two, siphoning of funds. And number three, which is very important, is the no proper exit plan. Any venture capitalist who is putting their money always see the exit plan. They are not interested how much money you are going to make or not. They just see the market capitalization of the funds, and they see the value of the whatsoever premium they have paid, whether they will get some profit or not after 3 years or 5 years. But there is no exit plan, and that's why within 5 years all these startups are failing. What you say about this, Mr. Harsh Juneja? 1 minute only, please.
I think government needs to intervene in this, and I think that was the last point which I think I had to explain. I could not, but let me brief it by saying, even if you look at the example which Professor Agarwal has given, 10,000 rupees is paid to the vendors, who are the roadside vendors. 100 crore budget, which I think has been talked about, is under a government plan called ACT. But where is that specific to startups, right? And SIDBI has given something for MSMEs and SMEs. The word startup, which is the main purpose of discussion today, has nothing direct coming from the government. So that needs to come as a rescue so that they not only get the rescue plan. In fact, I wanted to give the example, UK, France, Germany, the government has given specific word startup is being mentioned. Where is that word startup here in any of the forum of the government which is coming? Which is what I think the private players, which is seeding funds, etc., which you talked about, they are taking advantage of.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now my question goes to Ms. Divya. Ms. Divya, if you recall, I don't know whether you were there or not, in early 80s or early 90s, late 80s, there used to be a private placement. And the companies who are going for public issue, that word used to be public issue, not the IPO, which was coined afterwards. They used to privately place their funds. Basically, they take the advantage of promoters, directors, friends, relatives, and associates in that category, which the CCI at that time, then the SEBI has come afterwards. They restricted and whatnot. So basically, what the government has done is they have legalized the private placement by increasing the limit of private limited companies to 200. Earlier, it was not the shareholder limit. And that's why this startups business have come and the venture capitalists have come. Don't you think there is no control of the government? This is something which is totally unregularized thing as far as the startup is concerned. until unless the government has come out now with the startup to be registered. But there are plenty of startups which are not at all registered, and they are just having a laptop and doing the work, and they are doing very good business on local level. Don't you think we require a proper regulations even for the startups like we are having for the big companies? Miss Divya, please.
Okay, so first of all, with respect to Harsh, I was just going through, and I know there is one scheme by SIDBI, which is COVID-19 Startup Assistance Scheme. So, there is a scheme which came in around 2020. There is a scheme, with respect to the startups under the COVID impact. Now, coming to your question, see, every startup, because now, let me go back to 90s and 80s. Infosys was a startup at one moment of time. Reliance was a startup at one moment of time. Google, Apple, these all companies were startups. Whether you call it Flipkart, whether you call it Snapdeal, every company was a startup at one moment of time. Now, the capital, when we talk of, so today legalization, if you speak about, yes, DPIIT is the body which is registering the startups. And the one very important criteria what they have is that the company which is registered under startup should be either a private limited company or a LLP. So that structure itself gives the very legal due framework to the startups. Now, when the companies are registered as startup, they are private limited or LLPs as a corporate structure. The entire reporting mechanism when the capital is raised from investors, whether it is venture capital, whether it is private players, whether it is friends and relatives, entire reporting mechanism is being done with the Registrar of Companies, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So every data of the investment is available on the MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So I don't think there is any challenge with respect to the structure as far as these startups are concerned. Now, let me tell you one point here,
Please be brief, 30 seconds.
100%. So now one advice to the startups is focus on the value creation as far as the customers are concerned, rather than focusing on the valuation game. Because today, when we see the startups, it's a valuation game and the business. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Agrawal, I will not be able to come to you because there is a paucity of time.
Okay. But can I clarify just one point? That's all. Only 1 second.
2 seconds.
Yeah,
yes, please.
Yeah, direct payment is given only when there is support and assistance. Loan cannot be given directly to somebody's account. That's
okay. All. Okay. Thank you very much. So today you have seen about the COVID return impact on the startups. And one thing is very clear, all our panelists have the same view that in spite of the government efforts, the COVID-19 has impacted very badly the startups. And now the COVID returns is going to impact further. So the startups have to change their strategies, their management, financial managements, and so many suggestions were giving, very good suggestions were given by our panelists. I'm sure the startups or those who are planning to start a startup will think and see to it that they should not fail in their ventures. Thank you very much for joining us. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV, News Gaon Se, Samvad Saroka News, as well as was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor is to bring to you every day a new topic. And tomorrow, media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. The topic is marriage and law. And the panelists are Dr. Rajiv Anand, Senior Psychiatrist and Marriage Counselor, Mumbai, Advocate Jyoti Pawar, High Court, Mumbai, Advocate Sanket Gupta, High Court, New Delhi, Advocate Palash Banerjee, High Court, Lucknow. So please tune in tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. R. Gopal. Thank you very much, Mr. Harsh Juneja. And thank you very much, Ms. Divya, CS Divya Momaya, for joining us and giving and enlightening all our viewers.